The new emperor is ungrateful, actually planning to depose me, his first wife, and marry my concubine-born sister as empress. Given a second chance at life, I immediately broke off my engagement to him and supported another prince to take the throne. He didn't understand, asking me with bloodshot eyes, on what grounds. I raised my hand and slapped him. Your throne was secured entirely by my family. You tell me on what grounds. I was the crown prince's childhood sweetheart and first wife, as well as the greatest contributor to his ascension. But the first thing he did after ascending the throne was to banish me to the cold palace and marry my half-sister as empress. On the night of the empress's coronation, Pei appeared holding Jiangshu's hand, brazenly putting on a show of mutual affection right in front of me. Back then, I was already gravely ill and bedridden. Why should I? Watching the two of them being affectionate, my eyes turned scarlet. I refused to accept this. If I hadn't painstakingly cleared every obstacle for Pei, he, a fifth prince born in the cold palace, would never have become crown prince, let alone ascend the throne as he wished. The taste of blood welled up in my throat. I gritted my teeth and asked, still unwilling to give in, "It was I who helped you seize the throne. So why are you making Jiangshu the empress?" Pei frowned, a trace of disgust flashing in his eyes. "You are the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family. You've had everything since childhood. But Xuer is different from you. She has no one but me. Jiangning, you are going to die soon anyway, so you might as well leave the position of empress to Xuer." Different? What a difference. I sneered aloud, suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood, and plunged into darkness. Opening my eyes again, I was reborn back to the day of the grand wedding. I am still that legitimate daughter of the Jiang family, Jiangning, who grew up pampered and doted on, and not the abandoned empress clinging to life in the deep palace. At this time, Pei was just the crown prince. He hadn't yet been lifted onto the throne by the Jiang family. In my past life sick beyond cure, I couldn't bear the sudden betrayal by Pei and my half-sister. I coughed up blood and died, not long after. After I died, my soul didn't vanish right away. Instead, it drifted through the palace, and I watched helplessly as Pei, just a few days after my death, used a trumped-up charge to raid the Jiang family, who had long since given up real power and exiled the entire clan. Mom and Dad ended up dying miserably on the way to exile. Perhaps my resentment was hard to dispel. As my soul scattered, I returned to the Jiang manor before I was married. The auspicious hour has arrived, yet the crown prince, who was supposed to come fetch the bride, has still not appeared. The guests were buzzing with whispers, and the atmosphere became somewhat stiff for a moment. Dad didn't look too happy either, but he still made excuses for Pei. His Highness the Crown Prince deals with a myriad of affairs every day. Perhaps he is tied up with state business. In my previous life, I thought so too. It wasn't until just before I died, when Jiangshu whispered gloatingly in my ear, that I realized the shocking truth. Perhaps you don't know, sister, but on your wedding day, the reason His Majesty was late wasn't because he was tied up with state affairs. He was right there in the room, having a good time with your little sister. You, the official consort, have been a joke from start to finish. The memory ended, and I let out a cold laugh. Since you two like being a pair of illicit lovers, then I'll grant your wish. I beckoned my maid Xiaoman and gave her a few instructions through the red bridal veil. Xiaoman immediately looked at me in terror, wanting to speak but stopping herself. A while later, just as everyone in the main hall was getting impatient waiting, Xiaoman's panicked voice broke the silence. "His Highness the Crown Prince is in the third Mrs. room." This servant saw it with her own eyes. A single sentence stirred up 1,000 waves. Everyone rushed to Jiangshu's bedroom, and sure enough, heard the sounds of a man and woman making love coming from inside. Dad was furious and kicked the door open. Pei Mingjung and Jiangshu were having wild sex on the bed. Ironically, he was still wearing the bright red wedding robes bestowed by the emperor. Ah, Jiangshu let out a shrill scream, and her gleaming white body was seen all over by the crowd that had rushed over at the noise. Father stomped his foot in anger, wishing he could beat Jiangshu to death on the spot. "You vile daughter! It is your sister's wedding, and you actually messed around with your brother-in-law. How could the Jiang family produce such a shameless disgrace like you?" I also reacted in time, covering my face with my sleeve and shedding tears. "Little sister, if you can't stand me, you could have just come at me directly. Doing this now, where does that leave our Jiang family's dignity?" The guests all started talking at once. They all said Jiangshu was shameless and unworthy of being a daughter of the Jiang family. Jiangshu had never faced such a huge scene before. Her eyes rolled back, and she fainted right on the spot. Seeing that most of the onlookers were important court officials, Peiming steeled himself, decisively slapped himself twice in the face, then rushed to me crying out his innocence. "Aning, listen to me explain. It is not what you saw. It was her." Peiming raised his hand to point at Jiangshu. His expression twisted. "It was all your little sister seducing me. She was the one who spiked my food. That is the only reason I ended up like this." I looked at Peiming with a face full of shock, feeling that he was truly shameless to the extreme. Clearly the two of them were having a secret affair, yet now that everything had come to light, it had somehow turned into Jiangshu seducing him. If Jiangshu woke up and heard these words from Peiming, would she pass out from anger all over again? After all, he was still the crown prince. As for Peiming, Dad ultimately suppressed his rage and didn't lash out on the spot. It was just that this wedding banquet could not continue no matter what. After dismissing everyone, Dad asked me what I planned to do. I said, articulating every word, "I want to break off the engagement." "Have you thought this through?" Dad sighed helplessly. I nodded, took off the phoenix crown symbolizing my status as the crown princess, and bowed deeply to Father. No one knows a daughter like her father. Seeing that I was determined, Father didn't try to stop me anymore. I gave a faint smile, stepped out of Jiangshu's room, leaving behind an ashen-faced Fu Ming and the clamoring guests, and headed straight for the palace. News traveled fast. Even the emperor knew about the ugly incident involving the crown prince at the wedding banquet. Rumor has it the emperor flew into a rage in court, smashing several teacups in a row and berating the crown prince for completely disgracing the royal family. It wasn't until I entered the palace that he put away his angry expression and asked me what compensation I needed. "His Highness the Crown Prince and my younger sister have long been in love. I do not wish to be entangled in this, so I ask your majesty to annul my engagement to the Crown Prince." I knelt on the ground and kowtowed, my voice loud and firm. The emperor didn't seem to expect that I would want to break off the engagement right away. He was stunned for a moment before saying, "The Crown Prince is being foolish in this matter. I certainly won't let him off lightly. But this Jiangshu is your sister, after all. Good things should stay in the family. Crown Princess. Why not take her into the Eastern Palace and give her the status of a concubine?" The emperor specifically emphasized that I am the Crown Princess, telling me to know my place. After all, this imperial marriage was something I begged my dad to get for me back then. The dignity of the Son of Heaven won't allow a mere official's daughter like me to trample on it. But Peiming is not a good match. He is even waiting eagerly to suck the blood of me and my family. I cannot repeat the mistakes of my previous life. No matter the cost, I must call off this marriage today. I took a deep breath and kowtowed again, my attitude resolute. "Your humble subject has made up her mind. I beg your majesty to annul the marriage." The emperor's face was livid and he didn't speak for a long while. If I remember correctly, the imperial decree clearly stated back then that the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family was to marry the royal family's legitimate eldest son. But this legitimate eldest son is not the crown prince. Aunt Empress mentioned it as if unintentionally. That is right. The true legitimate eldest son is not Peiming, but rather the first Prince Peiyin, now His Highness Prince Shen, born to the late empress who slit her throat and died back then. After the late empress passed away, he voluntarily asked to leave the capital to guard the imperial mausoleum, and remains unmarried to this day. Your Majesty, I am willing to marry the first prince. I kowtowed loudly again. This time, the emperor didn't stop me again. He just waved his hand wearily and told me to go back and wait for the decree. Hearing that I wanted to break off the engagement, Peiming couldn't sit still and finally tore off his disguise. Jiangning, how dare you run to imperial father to break off the engagement? Shu'er is your own sister. As my crown princess, do you not even have this much tolerance? He stormed into the Jiang manor in a rage and hurled abuse at me. You jealous woman, I really misjudged you. In terms of talent and looks, Shu'er is on par with you. In terms of temperament, Shu'er is a cut above you. If not for your status as a legitimate daughter, how could you be worthy of me? I laughed. With a smack, the crisp sound of a slap rang out. Peiming rubbed his red and swollen cheek, his eyes filled with disbelief. What are you barking about? I wiped my hands, looking completely disgusted. Peiming flew into a rage. I am the crown prince. You dare hit me. I couldn't hold back, raising my hand to award him another slap. Picking up the bowl to eat, putting it down to curse you, really are a piece of work. As for the crown prince. I know better than anyone how Peiming got his position as crown prince. The year I met Peiming, I was 7. Back then, I was the most distinguished young lady from a noble family in the imperial city. My father was the country's prime minister, holding high status and great power. My mother was the legitimate daughter of the Grand General Protector of the nation, with an equally illustrious background. As the only legitimate daughter of my parents, I, Jiangning, enjoyed supreme glory from birth, my status almost comparable to a princess. The year I was 7, the late empress slit her throat in Weiyang Palace. My own aunt, noble consort Jiang, rose to power and became the new empress of the Zhou dynasty. I also got the chance to enter the palace and stay by my aunt's side. When passing by the cold palace, Peiming was curled up in a corner, letting those power-tripping maids and eunuchs punch and kick him, rather than giving up the steamed bun in his arms. Later, I learned from my aunt that Peiming's background was different from the other princes. His birth mother was just a lowly foot-washing maid in the night. The emperor was drunk. She climbed onto the dragon bed for a night of passion, and only then did she conceive Peiming, having become the emperor's woman. She should have enjoyed glory and wealth beyond the reach of ordinary people. But just a few days after giving birth to Peiming, news came from the palace that she had died in childbirth. After this incident, the emperor loathed Peiming even more, and all the concubines in the palace regarded him as a disgrace, throwing him into the cold palace to fend for himself. My appearance completely improved Peiming's dire situation. I taught him to read and write, and chased away the servants who bullied their master for him, who in the entire palace didn't know that the 5th prince, Peiming, was the person I, Jiangning, was protecting. If anyone dared to insult him, I would surely pay them back 10-fold or 100-fold. Peiming also treated me like a treasure, caring for me in every possible way. Having known each other for several years, through countless days and nights, I had long since immersed myself in this river of love, unable to pull myself out. So when later Peiming frankly told me he wanted that supreme position, I agreed without hesitation. At that, perhaps she never would in her entire life. The Jiang family was powerful, shrewd as the emperor was. How could he tolerate my aunt giving birth to a legitimate son with Jiang blood? In order to let Peiming become the crown prince, legitimately, I knelt before Auntie's palace, begging her to adopt Peiming as her own. But Auntie gave me a vicious slap, her tone filled with unspeakable disappointment. Jiangning, you are so foolish. Do you think that kid Peiming truly loves you? He is just after your family background. If you refuse to come to your senses, not only will you get yourself killed one day, but you'll even drag the entire Jiang family down to the grave with you." The words became a prophecy. But back then, I was bent on having my own way, taking beatings and scoldings without changing my mind. I knelt for 3 days and 3 nights, until I knelt to my last breath, leaving my legs with a hidden ailment, and my aunt, unable to bear it, finally relented. In the years that followed, with the help of the Jiang family, Pei Ming soared upwards, leaping from the ignored 5th prince to become the crown prince. And I finally, in the year I came of age, welcomed the status I had dreamed of, day and night crown princess. The struggle for imperial power has always been brutal. After becoming the crown princess, I faced assassination attempts and poisonings one after another. Barely 20 years old, I was left with a body full of chronic ailments. I struggled to hold on until Pei Ming ascended the throne, thinking I would finally see the clouds part and the moon shine. I didn't expect that in the end, I would cause my clan to be displaced, and my parents to meet a tragic end. Fortunately, in this life, it is not too late for anything. The day the imperial decree was issued, the whole capital exploded in an uproar. I successfully broke off the engagement and married the 1st prince instead. An Jiangshu was actually named the new crown princess. Xiaoman was furious, and only after she went out of her way to inquire did I learn that the emperor's original decree was for Pei Ming to take Jiangshu as a concubine. But Pei Ming knelt before the palace hall threatening to kill himself, claiming that Jiangshu was the love of his life. "How can the love of my life be a concubine?" These were the exact words Pei Ming shouted in the great hall, stiffening his neck. As the words fell, the entire court of civil and military officials was left speechless. The emperor was furious once again. After tossing about for several days, the final result was that Pei Ming got beaten until his butt split open, just to beg for this imperial decree of marriage. Jiangshu got carried away, just like in the previous life, coming to my room with a smug look to show off. "Even if you are the legitimate daughter with noble status, so what? His Highness the Crown Prince loves me, and only I am worthy to be his crown princess. And you, having missed out on the crown prince, can only be matched with a powerless 1st prince." Jiangshu tipped her head up slightly, proud as a peacock. I rubbed my hands helplessly, and while she was off guard, I stepped forward and smack gave her 2 slaps. "My baseborn sister really lives up to being born of a bed-climbing maid. You and Pei Ming are truly a perfect match. Missed out on the crown prince. The 1st prince has no power or influence. Idiots. Jiangshu and Pei Ming still don't understand even now. It isn't that I can only become the crown princess if he marries me, but rather, whoever I marry is the crown prince." After the 1st prince returned to the capital, he called me out by name, saying he wanted to see me. I didn't make excuses either. I met him openly and graciously at an inconspicuous tavern in the capital. When I first met Pei Yin, he was wearing a pale-colored long robe. His face was like jade, and his bearing was steady and composed. Even though I was used to seeing the handsome men of the capital, I was still utterly stunned by him. "Jiang Ning, legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's residence, pays respects to Your Highness Prince Shen. It is a pleasure to meet you, Your Highness." I sat at the table and smilingly poured him a cup of wine. Pei Yin paused, reached out to take the wine cup, took a light sip, and then got straight to the point. "Why me? This prince has never had any dealings with Miss Jiang. Even if Miss Jiang wants to spite the crown prince, you shouldn't have chosen this prince. This prince lacks talent and is afraid he isn't worthy of Miss Jiang." I was stunned for a moment. Pei Yin spoke so humbly and respectfully that for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. In my past life, ever since the Jiang clan was wiped out, the situation in the court began to grow turbulent and unstable. Yet Pei Ming and Jiangshu seemed oblivious, continuing their life of debauchery and luxury. Pei Ming reigned for less than 3 years, and the dynasty was tottering in the storm, on the verge of collapse. Watching Great Zhou about to perish Pei Yin, who had been biding his time at the imperial mausoleum for many years, quietly made his move, sending heavy troops to protect the imperial city. At the moment my soul dissipated, I saw with my own eyes Pei-yin kick Pei-ming off the dragon chair, sit on that high position himself, and succeed as the new emperor of the great Zhou dynasty. I thought, compared to that piece of trash Pei-ming who only knows how to seek pleasure, Fu-yin is more suitable to be the crown prince. Why must your highness sell yourself short? I raised my wine glass, the smile on my lips undiminished. I believe in my own judgment, and I am willing to lend your highness a hand. With that, I threw my head back and drank it all in one gulp. Pei-yin studied me intently for a good while. It wasn't until I involuntarily blushed that he let out a low chuckle. Miss Jiang is truly an intriguing person. It is the crown prince who is blind to actually discard a gem like a worn-out shoe. Before I could respond, Pei-yin spoke again. To show my sincerity, let me tell you a story. There was once a young lady from a noble family. She was outstanding, a standard for the many high-born girls in the capital. When she came of age, countless sons of the powerful and wealthy sought her hand, and matchmakers practically wore down her family's threshold. But she just had to fall for a prince whose mother had died and whom everyone could bully. Ignoring her family's opposition, she married him. After the wedding, that prince sweet-talked her, saying that when he rules the world one day, she would be the only one by his side. She believed it to be true, not hesitating to threaten suicide to coerce her clan into supporting that prince. Hearing this, my expression tightened. What happened then? A trace of mockery flashed across Pei-yin's brow. Later, that down-and-out prince finally got his wish, ascending to the position he previously hadn't dared to dream of. He did make that woman empress, but his past promises were nothing but illusions. New women were carried into the harem, one after another, each younger than the last, each more beautiful than the last. She fell ill from depression, and her health declined day by day. By then, she had a child of her own, and this child became the only hope that kept her alive. But the first thing a blind person does after regaining their sight is to throw away their cane, and the emperor was no exception. The existence of her and her family would only prove to the world just how destitute and down and out the now infinitely glorious emperor once was. A few years later, the emperor ordered the extermination of her entire clan, utterly dead inside. She left her young child behind, drew a sword, and slit her own throat. Now it was my turn to fall silent, because the main character in Pei-yin's story was none other than his birth mother, an empress who died without even receiving a posthumous title. The late empress's cause of death wasn't much of a secret. The case of her family conspiring with the enemy in treason back then was known to all, and when I stubbornly insisted on marrying Pei-ming, my aunt had also mentioned the late empress, exasperatedly warning me not to follow in her footsteps. At the time I didn't think much of it, but I never expected there to be such a history behind it. How incredibly similar to my past life, I asked Pei-yin. Why are you telling me this? My imperial mother's death is a pain I can never let go of in this lifetime. As Pei-yin spoke, he looked up at me, his gaze sincere. I am revealing these past scars not to win Miss Jiang's sympathy. Rather, I want to tell Miss Jiang that if I can exact my revenge, I certainly won't let Miss Jiang meet the same fate as my imperial mother. I am not that bastard Pei-ming. Even without love, I would absolutely never be ungrateful. I was filled with mixed feelings, my heart throbbing, but my face remained calm. If the oath is broken, die young and violently, Pei-yin responded solemnly. I breathed a sigh of relief, only then feeling a bit more at ease. Because of the crown prince's prior misconduct, the emperor issued another decree urging him and Zhang Shu to get married as soon as possible. The wedding date for Pei-yin and me was thus postponed until half a year later. This half a year was enough for us to do a lot of things. What I didn't expect was that Jiangshu would actually be diagnosed with a pregnancy before the big wedding. I pulled at the corners of my mouth. Good Lord, it seems those two haven't been idle lately. Otherwise, how could they have made a baby so quickly? This is just great. Their reputations were already rotten to the core, and now they stink to high heaven. When Mom and Dad heard the news, they were so angry they couldn't swallow a bite for several meals in a row. Jiangshu, however, was smug, believing the imperial heir in her belly was a trump card gifted by heaven, a major weapon for vying for favor. It would be one thing if she just acted up on normal days, but she actually ran in front of Mother, clamoring for Mother to recognize her as a legitimate daughter and add to her dowry. She even shamelessly boasted that if we didn't satisfy her, once she becomes empress in the future, she'd definitely make our whole family pay spouting such nonsense. Even my naturally gentle mother couldn't hold back this time. She directly ordered Jiangshu to be locked in the woodshed, forbidden from taking a single step outside before she gets married. She wants to court death herself, and there is no stopping her. Seizing this chance, I suggested to Father that we strike Jiangshu's name from the family tree. Father hesitated for a long while, ultimately unable to make up his mind. I didn't rush to urge him either, knowing when to quit while I was ahead. The ties between noble clans have always been deeply intertwined. Pull one hair and the whole body moves, for the sake of the other sisters in the clan still waiting in their boudoirs, and for my sake as the legitimate daughter. Father wouldn't refuse my request. A few days later, the crown princess was married off from the Jiang residence, in front of the many high officials and nobles of the capital, as well as Pei Ming. Father announced he was severing father-daughter ties with Jiangshu, and that the Jiang family would henceforth have nothing to do with the crown princess. Pei Ming's face instantly became ugly to the extreme. Jiangshu was dumbfounded too. She abruptly ripped off the veil, pointed at me, and yelled, "It was you! You did this, Jiangning! You bitch! You are just jealous that I am favored by the crown prince. Enough!" Pei Ming suddenly shouted angrily. Jiangshu was startled and immediately put on a different face, her eyes brimming with tears. Pei Ming warned her in a nasty tone, "If you keep making a scene, you can get the hell back to the Eastern Palace yourself." With that, he flung his sleeves and left, leaving Jiangshu alone to face the whispers of the entire hall. Jiangshu gritted her teeth with hatred, but outwardly she dared not defy Pei Ming, so she could only lower her veil again and follow behind him in humiliation. Watching the bridal sedan chair that seemed to be fleeing in panic, I curled my lips and smiled. No wonder Pei Ming lost his composure. He originally figured that one stroke couldn't write two Jiang characters. Even if he couldn't marry me, there was still Jiangshu. As long as Jiangshu is the crown princess, the Jiang family has to be tied to the same boat as the crown prince. I am suddenly curious, without the identity of a Jiang family daughter, whether Jiangshu could still be the true love Pei Ming speaks of. After completely drawing a clear line, Pei Ming's days in the royal court also became harder and harder. After all, his background is the same as Jiangshu's. It really can't be considered glorious. Most of the old ministers in the court are pedantic old foxes. How could a prince with an unknown birth mother, who relied on a woman to rise to power, become the crown prince? In the past, there was still father and the Jiang family retainers to shield him from trouble. But this time, Pei Ming finally realized with a start that he had no one left to rely on in the court. To hold onto his power, Pei Ming actually set his sights on me again. I refused to see him, so he ordered someone to send me a letter. "Jiang Ning, over these past days I've finally realized that you are in my heart. Even though I can't give you the position of crown princess right now, I am still keeping the position of secondary consort for you. Just admit it, you still love me." There wasn't much content, just a few words, yet reading them left me baffled. He really has some nerve. I immediately sent the letter back to the Eastern Palace unopened, and I specifically instructed that it must be delivered right into the crown princess's hands. With Jiangshu's temperament, she won't just sit there and wait for her doom. "Me dear sister, Make sure you don't let me down. Sure enough, that night at the Eastern Palace, the most intense argument ever broke out between Jiangshu and Pei Ming. According to the maids serving that night, Jiangshu cursed Pei Ming out for being half-hearted, marrying her one moment and pining after me, his old flame. The next, Pei Ming didn't back down either, furiously scolding Jiangshu for being jealous and having none of the demeanor of a crown princess. By the end of the argument, Jiangshu was confined to her quarters, and she even nearly had a miscarriage. Xiaoman was grinning from ear to ear when she heard the news. But I wasn't surprised in the slightest. Pei Ming is essentially just a profit-seeking piece of scum. How could someone like that possibly view his wife as his true love? Jiangshu being with him is just a case of birds of a feather flocking together. At best, having bet on the wrong horse. I imagine Jiangshu must be burning with anxiety right now. But I didn't expect that, in order to deal with me, she would actually sacrifice her biggest bargaining chip. 3 days later, a banquet was held in the palace. When the drinking was at its peak and everyone was merry, Jiangshu secretly slipped me a note, asking to meet me in the imperial garden. I readily agreed to go seeing Jiangshu again. She stuck out her not yet showing pregnant belly, eyes surging with hatred. "Jiangning, you can't beat me. I am the crown princess, the future empress." As soon as the words fell, she suddenly fell backward, her body smashing hard onto a sharp rock, blood pouring straight down from between her legs. "Help. The crown princess has been pushed down by eldest Miss Jiang." A scream immediately assaulted my ears. I turned my head. Jiangshu's maid was yelling all over the place. By the time everyone arrived, Jiangshu had already miscarried. "Sister, you have such a cruel heart. Why did you harm the child of the crown prince and me?" Jiangshu curled up in Pei Ming's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Pei Ming was furious and rushed forward wanting to slap me, but was stopped by Pei Yin with one hand. He said indifferently, "This is a serious matter. It would be better to invite the imperial physician to uphold justice." Hearing this, Jiangshu's face turned deathly pale. The imperial physician hurried over, but after checking her pulse, his expression looked slightly troubled. I reminded him reassuringly, "Feel free to speak your mind." The crown princess had taken safflower beforehand. Even without the fall, the child in her womb could not have been saved. Moreover, this pregnancy was unstable to begin with. The imperial physician raised his eyes to peek at Pei Ming, his voice gradually fading, not daring to say any more. But the truth had already come to light. Pei Ming could bear it no longer, and that slap finally landed on Jiangshu's face. "You vile woman, how dare you kill my child? The crime of murdering a royal heir and attempting to frame your legitimate older sister is no small matter." The emperor and empress were furious. Jiangshu was publicly demoted to a concubine. Even Pei Ming was implicated along with her, confined to the Eastern Palace and forbidden from leaving without an imperial edict. Jiangshu was scared out of her wits. She kept kowtowing non-stop, crying and begging the emperor to take back his order. I pretended I couldn't bear to watch and stepped forward to help her up. While no one was looking, I curled my lips and chuckled low in her ear. "Sister, don't be in such a hurry. Your good days are still ahead of you." Jiangshu. Oh, Jiangshu. Once you lose the protection of this crown princess status in Pei Ming's favor, your future days in the Eastern Palace will be very exciting. As for me, I'll wait and see. For the next few days, the Eastern Palace was dead silent. Only in the dead of night would wisps of shrill wailing drift out. Mai and Pei Yin's operation was proceeding closely. In just a few days, countless emaciated, bruised and battered scholars stormed the Jingzhou prefecture in a mighty mass, beating the drums to cry injustice, accusing the current crown prince of selling official posts and titles and engaging in corruption and fraud. Hundreds of complaints were laid out before the Jingzhou governor, every word weeping blood, every sentence soaked in tears. The entire court, civil and military alike, was thrown into an uproar. It turned out that ever since Peiming became the crown prince, he had secretly colluded with wealthy playboys, using his power to sell official posts and titles to amass a fortune, causing talented commoners to be unable to fulfill their ambitions, leaving pearls covered in dust. Afterwards, to cover up his crimes, he even conspired with the nobles to destroy the bodies and erase the evidence. Over a few years, the victims numbered over 1,000. Led by my father, the ministers submitted petitions one after another, asking the emperor to depose Peiming from his position as crown prince. Powerless and at the end of his rope, Peiming had no chance of making a comeback. The entire imperial city was dead silent, like the calm before a storm, just waiting for the emperor to issue the decree and appoint a new heir. I sent a message to Pei Yin, telling him to watch out for Peiming's next move. A trapped beast will still fight. We had to be on guard. But I didn't expect Peiming to move this fast. The moment the decree deposing him arrived, Peiming killed the messenger eunuch with one slash and led his personal guards killing their way right into the palace. Pools of blood covered the ground, looking like a living hell. When Pei Yin and I arrived, he was standing on the high platform, holding a sword in his left hand against the emperor. Peiming stared at me obsessively, the madness in his eyes about to spill over. I took 2 steps back, forcing down the nausea rising in my chest, and my eyes landed on Jiangshu. It had been barely a month, yet she, once so high and mighty, had now become a completely different person. Disheveled hair and a grimy face, a haggard appearance, with bloody whip marks covering the entire body. This is the true love Peiming swore to the heavens about. Utterly ridiculous. Sister, sister, save me. I was wrong. I'll never dare to fight you for a man again. Peiming is just a lunatic, a beast. Please save me, sister. Seeing me, Jiangshu suddenly began to struggle, her voice shrill. Save you? All right, I said slowly, seeing a glimmer of hope gradually appear on her face. I smiled with satisfaction, then ruthlessly shattered it. I'll save you and send you to your release right now. You and Peiming can go down to the underworld together to atone for your sins. As soon as the words fell, countless gold-armored cavalry suddenly emerged from all around, completely surrounding Peiming and her. It was the royal guard under Prince Shen's command. Seize them. At Pei Yin's command, the heavily outnumbered Peiming was soon captured. The emperor, still shaken after being saved, hid behind Pei Yin, his eyes full of relief. The rebellion failed, and Peiming and Jiangshu were thrown into the death dungeon together. As heroes who quelled the rebellion, the right to decide how to deal with these two fell into my and Pei Yin's hands. When I visited the 2 of them in the death row, Peiming was grabbing Jiangshu by the neck and hurling insults at her. You bitch, if it weren't for you. How could I have ended up like this? I sneered, turned my head and ordered the jailers to pull the 2 apart, and quietly handed Jiangshu a dagger. At this point, I think Jiangshu will make a choice. The next day, news of the deposed Crown Prince Peiming's death came out of the death row, and the murderer was none other than the former Crown Princess Jiangshu. Taking advantage of the night, while Peiming was sound asleep, she gripped that dagger tightly without hesitation and stabbed it deep into Peiming's heart, killed with a single slash. I've avenged most of the family vengeance from my past life. Only Jiangshu remains. For the sake of our blood ties, I spared Jiangshu's life. But if you do wrong, you always have to pay the price. I still kept her locked in the death cell, keeping Peiming's corpse company day and night. What awaits her for the rest of her life will be endless imprisonment and torture. After Peiming died, the emperor suddenly fell seriously ill. I asked my aunt and found out that on that day, in order to leave himself a way out, Peiming actually fed the emperor poison. Even though he was treated in time afterwards, his constitution was ultimately damaged. The emperor also knew his days were numbered, and he valued and relied on Pei Yin even more. One afternoon, Pei Yin suddenly came to find me and asked if I wanted to go with him to settle years of grudges, so I followed him into the palace and arrived at when we arrived. The bedchamber was empty. We could only faintly hear bursts of coughing coming from the bed. Cough, cough, water. Pei Yin walked over to the bedside, meekly picked up the water bowl from the table, and fed the emperor sip by sip. Cough, cough. These damn slaves. How dare they neglect us like this? When we recover, we'll have these negligent slaves dragged out one by one to be beaten to death, sliced to pieces. Cough, cough. The emperor struggled to lift his arm, his face flushed bright red. This was the first time I had seen the high and mighty Son of Heaven so wretched and fragile. They haven't served Father Emperor for just one day, and Father Emperor already can't stand it. But when my Mother Empress was imprisoned by you in Weiyang Palace back then, going 3 whole days without a drop of water, did Father Emperor ever think about her safety? Pei Yin put down the bowl and said to himself. The emperor instantly choked up, frowning in displeasure. What? Are you blaming me for how I handled your mother back then? Your mother's clan colluded with the enemy in treason. The evidence was conclusive. For the sake of our past affection, I didn't strip her of her empress title. I merely put her under house arrest. It was she herself who couldn't get over it and sought death. Pei Yin interrupted with a cold sneer. Colluding with the enemy in treason. Conclusive evidence. It was Father Emperor who specifically ordered people to forge that evidence just to get rid of the Xia family. Wasn't it? My heart skipped a beat when I heard that. The Xia family was the late Empress's maternal clan. They had always been loyal to the sovereign and the country, strictly abiding by their duties. Sure enough, there was a hidden truth behind that case from years ago. The emperor suddenly gasped heavily. Who told the Xi clan to achieve so much that they threatened their master? The entire court only knew of the Xi family and the empress, but held no regard for me. If I didn't get rid of them, could I still sit securely on this throne? Pei Yin sneered. Father is still the same as back then, gauging a gentleman's heart with a petty mind. I really don't know why Mother was so blind back then to fall for someone like you. As his words fell, he stood up and clapped his hands, and a young man slowly walked out from the inner hall. I recognize this person. It is Pei Yin's cousin, the once stunningly brilliant young general, Xi Yang. He actually didn't die. He even survived safe and sound. You are that kid from the Xi family. How is that possible? The emperor also wore a look of shock, and even started speaking incoherently. Your Majesty, I trust you have been well. Ziyang gave a sinister smile. The emperor curled up in panic, pointing at Pei Yin and the other. Cursing, traitorous son, vile spawn. What do you want to do? What are you doing? Xi Yang curled the corners of his lips, pulled out the imperial seal and 3 edicts, placed them right in front of the emperor, and said mockingly, Stamp these 3 edicts, and I'll spare your life. The emperor said, trembling. You speak. First, an edict of exoneration. This will restore the reputation of the Xia family, the Manchu clan, who were wrongly accused and tragically killed by you. Second, the edict of self-condemnation. Proclaim to the world that you are fatuous and incompetent, that you wrongly blamed loyal ministers, and atone to the wronged souls of my Xia family and the people of the world. Third, the edict of abdication. You are mediocre and cannot tell right from wrong. If you hadn't married my aunt, you wouldn't be fit to be this emperor. Now, you should return everything that never belonged to you. In the end, the emperor stamped his seal on these 3 edicts. Before leaving, Xie Yang deliberately took a couple of extra looks at me, then turned his head and teased Pei Yin with a smile. Yo, didn't notice just now. Who is this young lady? My face flushed red, and I subconsciously hid behind Pei Yin. Pei Yin instead squeezed my hand tight, interlacing his fingers with mine. She is your future cousin-in-law. The following day, with the help of 3 imperial edicts personally issued by the emperor, Pei ascended the throne and successfully exonerated the Xia family. Unlike my previous life where I married Pei Ming, in this life, I ultimately became the empress, the mother of the nation. Pei also kept his promise. On his first day on the throne, he issued an edict declaring that in this lifetime, he would have only me as his wife, and no other women. Once the edict was issued, the whole nation was in an uproar. Everyone envied the legitimate daughter of the Zhang family, saying, "I was lucky to have met Pei Yin, such a good emperor and good husband." When Pei Yin heard this, however, he shook his head with a smile, lowered his head to lightly kiss my cheek. No, being able to meet the Empress is truly my honor spanning 3 lifetimes. Side story: Pei Yin's perspective. I had a very long dream. In the dream, I saw with my own eyes a daughter of a noble family experiencing everything my Empress mother had once endured. And her ultimate end was just like my Empress mother's, depressed and unhappy, dying filled with resentment. She clearly had such excellent family background and circumstances, yet she risked everything for a cowardly, incompetent man, dragging her entire family into the vortex of imperial power. I secretly cursed her for being stupid and hateful, yet I couldn't help but feel a degree of heartache for her. Later, an imperial edict arrived at the imperial mausoleum. I was stunned, granting me a marriage. The person chosen for the marriage was actually that hateful, stupid, noble daughter from my dream. Without thinking much about it, I obeyed the edict and returned to the capital. As soon as I returned, I was impatient to see her. Sure enough, she came to the appointment. Seeing her again, she had already blossomed into a slim and graceful beauty. She thought it was the first time we met, though, and even foolishly introduced herself. Actually, we had already met way back when she entered the palace at 7 years old. This naive little girl saw the 5th imperial brother being bullied by palace servants, and couldn't help but stand up for him. But that was nothing more than an act put on by the 5th imperial brother and those palace servants. The goal was just to latch onto her to climb the social ladder. She really fell for it. Truly exactly like my queen mother. I thought her life would follow in my queen mother's footsteps, but after returning to the capital, I unexpectedly found that she was different. She seemed to no longer be infatuated with Pei Ming. I could even sense her hatred towards him. And she gradually revealed her brilliant side, quite a few times. She made me look at her in a whole new light. It was then that I finally realized I had fallen for her. After ascending the throne and clearing the Xia family's name, I immediately issued an edict to prove to her, and to the world, that in this life I will be with her alone, one couple for a lifetime. If I break this oath, may I die a premature and violent death.